Women in Leadership, brought to you by HeronCode, the management consultancy for what happens next. For more information, you can visit HeronCode.com. The HeronCode Women in Leadership podcast season 3 continues. I'm your host, Nimi Mehta. It's been such a pleasure having you and enjoying the season so far. You know what I'm going to say. Every single episode, we have a fantastic, phenomenal woman that joins us and shares their journey and their story. And today is absolutely no different. I'm joined by Muna Merghani, who is a Chief HR and Sustainability Officer with over 20 years of experience in humanitarian aid, development management, and corporate sustainability. Muna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Excited.
Amazing. I'm so excited for this conversation because there is so much I want to know about you. And as the listeners know, I do like to take everybody on a journey of getting to where you are today. But a lot of work goes into that, and a lot of challenges, pros, cons, amazing moments to tough moments. And so I want to know from the very beginning, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sudan,
Mm-hmm.
Khartoum mainly, which is the capital. And I was raised there, and I've lived all of my life there.
Wow.
I actually recently moved to Dubai after war erupted in Sudan in April.
Mm-hmm.
I've been employed here since 2015, but I opted to be based in Sudan because the majority of the activities of the company where I work is theirs. But then I moved here in August to settle. Yeah.
You're fresh. You're fresh
I'm
to
very
Dubai.
fresh, yes.
I love that. And tell, paint the picture for us a bit. What was growing up in Sudan like?
It was interesting. Not easy all along. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I frankly never intended to leave the country, as difficult as it got. But then it's home. And I was trying to make a difference there. I was trying to make a change. And yeah, it had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
But then it's home, and I enjoyed living there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what was Muna like as a kid?
I was a loner, I think. I used to do a lot of thinking. Yeah. But then I lived in a happy family, warm. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings.
Wow.
And we've lived initially, it was like a big family home with my uncle and his kids as well and wife. And then we moved to another house as of 5 years.
Wow.
Until April.
Yeah?
I lived in the same house.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I was moving out maybe for studies.
Yeah.
But then I lived in exactly the same house from 5 years old until 46.
Wow. I love that.
But I liked it.
Yeah.
And of course it experienced a lot of changes, siblings getting married and moving out and then coming back again, and then the grandkids and all of that.
Yeah.
And I was living with my parents until my dad passed away last year, and my mom moved to Dubai with me when we left the country in April. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, being quite a quiet individual when you were growing up, were you a big dreamer though in your head? Did you have ideas of what you wanted to be when you were older?
I did. They're different from where I am now, but let's say they're anchored in the same, maybe anchored by the same spirit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was it? What was it that you wanted to be when you were older?
I've mentioned this in another podcast. I don't want to be repetitive, but it's a bit silly. But I wanted to be a traffic police woman. I've mentioned it before.
Wow.
And all my friends laugh at it. But then I think it's anchored in the fact that I like to organize things, and I like to maybe lead.
Yes.
Make sure everything is in order.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely. And one thing you mentioned earlier was that this want to make change.
Yes. Yeah.
For the good, for the better.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, I think I grew up in a society contrary to what the media reflects, that is not necessarily led by women, but we always had women leaders. whether in the political arena, whether in trade, whether as rulers, as was the case at the time of the Nubian kingdom. So I was always surrounded by women who were making a change, who were strong characters, who were like leading even their households.
Yeah.
And then I was exposed to philanthropy at a very young age through my mom and aunt's work. They were both very much involved in charity organizations, and my mom namely was in charge. She dedicated a lot of her years supporting a home for orphaned girls and a school for the deaf and mute. So I would get involved here and there, like if there were like charity events, if she needed to. Sometimes they would help one of the girls in the orphanage get married, so they would be preparing her stuff and buying her stuff, and I remember that was usually very exciting. And then when I grew up and matured, I realized that sustainable development and development work would have more of a lasting impact. So I studied computer sciences, and then right after I realized it was not the thing for me.
Yeah.
And so I started in parallel studying development, and I studied in France administration of international aid. I also did an MSc in development management with the Open University in the UK, and I started working for NGOs. I worked for Care International, Plan International. I did some training with Oxfam in Oxford, and then I worked a lot with the European Union, and this where I traveled extensively throughout Sudan, and yeah, this is when it started.
Yeah. I mean, to be studying one thing but then completely pursue a career for something different. Some people might be completely terrified to change.
Yeah.
You put a lot of maybe time, investment, money into studying in university and whatnot. Where did that, was it easy to make the change?
It wasn't easy, but I think I started at a young age. So I was in my I did university between the age of 15 and 19. And so at that age, you usually take erratic decisions.
Yes.
And, you know.
Yep.
So it wasn't easy, but I think I had the motivation, I had the energy, I had the so I did both of them at that time, and I did also a high diploma in French language at that time. So it was doable but challenging. Yes.
Yeah. And so you made that jump into social and community development. What did you find during that time that needed your specific attention in the industry?
It was a time, I think, when the majority of whether national or international organizations were focusing more on humanitarian aid, because Sudan was going through a lot of conflicts, civil war, a lot of displacement, a lot of refugees. And it was always humanitarian aid, like hit and run. And then I realized that development is what makes a lasting impact. And second is where my heart lies, because you get to see the lasting effect in people's lives, in families' lives, and particularly women's lives. And that's why I did my MSc in development and opted to work more with development agencies rather than humanitarian. And then when you train people, when you help them build their capacities, give them means for income generation, this is what makes a difference. It's not like the food distribution. Well, that is necessary sometimes, but the vaccination campaigns, the food distribution, it just wears you out in a while.
And I mean, whilst you're taking on these roles and really trying to make a change, you're also trying to develop yourself as a leader. And you're learning from everyone around you. Did you have any mentors during your early years of your career?
I was always lucky to have very good line managers. So they would give me tips, they would coach me, they would mentor me. So there was not a particular one, but all my line managers were very good. Even the not very good ones, you get to learn from them. You know, the difficult ones, the, with all due respect, incompetent ones. You just learn how to deal with that particular situation. But I did get C-suite coaching for 10 months. And that was a life-changing experience at a personal level and at a professional level as well. Because when I moved from being a department manager to a C-suite, it was very difficult for me to stop being hands-on and doing things on my own, but rather lead my team into doing it. That was a very tricky transition phase. And it was very stressful as well, because there was a moment in time when I thought I could be doing or filling the gaps of like the whole team, or like doing everything that needed to be done, rather than just guiding and leading the way. So the coaching helped a lot there.
And I mean, people do have different leadership approaches. Could you share with us what your leadership approach is?
Be open, definitely. Acknowledge that your team, and because I've handled teams in different countries, so acknowledging that they're like people are different. Acknowledge that people not only different in terms of how they like to do things, but also in terms of their stage of their careers and what they're going through. And also work as a team. I always like to say that I learned more from my team than they learned from me. And also how to lead during the time of adversities. That was a big like factor. Because in Sudan, for the past 5 years, we've had serious political conflict. And this was led by youth that made up a big part of our manpower. So leading during those times and catering for the needs of those youth that wanted to make a change in the country, but they also had commitments in a private sector, was very tricky. So remaining open, communicating well, and also consulting with other peers. So we used to always have a task force of what do we need to do, because sometimes there would be demonstrations planned for several days in a row during working hours. In terms of labor law, in terms of not only labor law, but in terms of what the country needs, should we allow these youth and even us to get involved, or keep on the side? It was always a very tricky conversation, but I think we made the right decisions all along. And so leading is not only leading your team, but leading the work through difficult times. The time of COVID, for example, it was also very tricky times. And being a part of a group that had industry as a big part of its operations, working from home was not always possible. So organizing that, making sure that neither the company is harmed nor the employees are put at risk, was also very tricky. But so by leading, we need to acknowledge first that we don't know it all. Time is changing fast, things are changing fast. We need to always be ready to make the right decision at the right time, in a fair manner as well.
It's tricky, isn't it? When we do talk about these tough times that the whole world is going through, that particular societies and communities are going through, there's a line between being a leader and then feeling personal empathy towards certain team members of whatever issues and challenges they're coming across. How do you draw the line, and how do you get out of personal empathy mode and into leader mode, and vice versa?
I rely on empathy more. And I like to just, the human factor is more important than policies and rules and regulations. And when I'm in doubt, I used to just refer to my line manager or our CEO who's my line manager and just consult, or my colleagues. And luckily, when I joined Haggar Group, it was always a people-centered organization. So if it's for the benefit of our people, we would go for it, even if it's a bit, not governed by our policies and regulations. Yes, yeah.
Because, I feel like I've previously worked for companies that don't align with the same values that I have.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to grow up the ladder and you're trying to get there and you're trying to grow as an individual professionally, you kind of oversee that. I feel like that's less of a priority. Only now that I'm further on in my career am I more selective about the things and the people that I work with. Did you ever feel that along your journey, or were you quite lucky with the people and the teams and the organizations that you came across and worked with specifically? Or do you feel like that should be compromised at all in aligning values?
I think I experienced that when I was younger with a few of the international NGOs I was working with. Particularly working in your home country and then seeing decisions made about it by, with all due respect, but foreigners. And again, if we take the humanitarian aid, for example, and you would see, it did not sit well with me.
Yeah.
And it did not make that much of an impact. And it was sometimes a lot of good said in the media, but not in reality. And that's when I grew up, when I matured, you realized that you have more options to just leave and maybe say something about it, not just leave, and then make a difference, make a change. And that's when I started being more inclined to work with national NGOs, development activities, and so forth. But then luckily with the company I'm with now, the ethos of the company and the values really match what I like. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, mine. Yeah.
And so then, as a woman in the industry, tell me, when you first joined the industry, was it against the norm for a woman to be in any leadership roles?
Not at all. No. It just, I think it happened by default that the majority were men, particularly that our biggest employer under the umbrella of Haggar were industrial companies, and you don't see the market supplying, or women are not inclined to do like vocational training or like electronics, or it was by default men. But we were trying hard to change that, and so it was not it was not at all strange, but it was not, the majority of the employees were men and still are men. Yeah.
So then, in any positions that you were in, was it well received? Did you come across any challenges that you particularly felt like they were specifically because you were a woman?
There were, yeah, definitely. They were. And I think they were done unconsciously. Like the obstacles I faced were not deliberate obstacles put on my way. It was, how we are, our mindset, and how we're conditioned, maybe, be it men or women, we're conditioned to not accept certain things. So the obstacles, because I'm also, as mentioned earlier, I have been raised in a country and also a family where women were quite strong and leaders. So I think that prepared my mind to also respond to these obstacles naturally, and find a solution for them, either by being a bit, assertive, more assertive than necessary, or than usually the norm, or by just putting my foot down and pushing through.
Yeah, because I've spoken to a lot of women on this podcast, and we've all had different ways that we have kind of navigated in order to, I guess, gain respect from the industry at a large, but then also our team members, our peers, our colleagues. There was one particular thing that one guest said, and she said that was, I had to give my masculine energy in order to be received with respect. There was another woman who said, I totally honed in on my feminine energy because I think that's my strength.
Okay.
Where do you lie on that? Is there a specific tone that you feel like you have to exude in a professional setting?
Yes, and I think that I learned that earlier on. The moment I graduated, I worked as a teaching assistant in a university, and I was very small in size, in terms of weight, height, everything.
Yeah.
So when I used to stand in front of a class of, like, it was a governmental university that had people from all regions of Sudan, and some of the students were really even older than I am in age, because it also, they used to give training courses to, like, maybe policemen, and in using computers, Excel, Word, and all of that. So that was the most intimidating experience I ever went through. And that's when I learned to change my voice tone, change my body language, even the way I used to dress.
Wow.
And it would give me a bit more presence in the room, because sometimes it was even very hard for me to, reach the blackboard, or, like, be able to stand in front of the blackboard and make them, stop talking. They were like teenagers, some of them, and it was very intimidating. But I think I managed to. That was when I worked on my communication skills, presentation skills, even as mentioned, my body language and my voice tone. And then this carried along with me. And yeah, so, but then when I maybe assumed a C-suite position, I was very lucky to have very, very respectful colleagues, very supportive. I would go to them for opinion and for advice, and but I never faced any resistance from them in any way. No.
And I mean, earlier you touched on working with the younger generations, you know, in order to increase awareness of social development and the ways. It's interesting because their minds work very differently to ours.
Yeah.
We call them Gen Zers or whatever you want to call them. But what have you noticed as a way of how they are perceiving the space of social development, and where do you think it's going in their hands?
I think they're very open, and they're on the contrary, they're very much versed to what's happening in the world, and they have a very strong code of conduct and ethos in particular in what they can accept and not accept. Maybe the terms and the is different from what we use. They're more into the sustainable development goals, the SDGs, how they can have profit-making businesses, but also incorporate the SDGs in them. So it's a bit different. It's not like charity. It's not philanthropy. It's different. And they're very, I don't want to say hasty, but they're very quick in the decisions they make and how they want to change things. So it's as you mentioned, it's a completely different generation, a complete different way of thinking and doing things. Yeah.
And in terms of businesses, on the business front of things, you're seeing a lot more companies become a lot more aware of their contribution to things like social development, to sustainability. What are they doing towards the planet? There was a part where I feel like, or there was a time where I feel like people were just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
To kind of tick the box and to say they're sustainable, just to have the label on it, because it became just a cool trend, I guess.
Yeah.
What space do you think we're in now in terms of companies actually taking this on board and implementing it into their foundations for a longer future, I guess?
I think the greenwashing is still happening, but to a lesser extent, because when some companies did it and it came out, they were badly named and shamed. And then companies are realizing that what's in it for them, and they're realizing that if they don't keep up, they will be left behind, and that it's not rocket science. So they're more at ease of implementing, like either taking care of the environment, being aware of their impact on the society, on people, and also governance. Like internal governance helps you as a company remain more sustainable. So I think there are a lot of people who initially just jumped on the wagon of sustainability and just using the terms and it's mentioned greenwashing, and then they realize that no, they cannot do that anymore. And also in terms of at the state level, whichever country it is, governance is becoming more robust there, and requirements are becoming more clear in terms of companies being aware of their carbon footprint, their impact on the environment, all of that. So they sort of don't have an option but to do it.
Yeah. I think, Dubai is a great place for accountability. They really are held accountable, a lot of companies across here. And you recently moved. Tell me about how that move has been for you professionally.
Well, I've been holding the same job.
Yeah.
But the move was, it's a bit of it was quite hectic because I was in between a lot of minds on whether coming here or going to Cairo. And I'm taking care of my elderly mother, and also I have one son. So to make the decisions about schooling, where to settle, and it's my very first time to live out of my country, so it was quite tricky. But then I just calmed down and took the decision to be here, because I think here there are a lot of opportunities. I can continue with my job. I can continue learning. I can continue studying if I want to. And
is that something you'd be interested in then, further learning?
I am actually currently doing a few things here and there. Yeah.
How do you have time for it?
I do manage to find the time. I sometimes just realize that I had just shot myself in the foot by enrolling in something, but then I end up doing it. Yeah.
And I mean, I read here not just professionally try to do what you can for community and society, but even in your free time, you're an active volunteer. You like to contribute. What is it that you do outside of your professional role?
Well, back home in Sudan, and now a bit, I like to help local NGOs a lot, either with, maybe sometimes you would find a local NGO that's doing a great job, but they struggle with maybe writing the reports, with approaching donors. And because it could be like maybe a group of women who were refugees or who were displaced and created a small NGO, and they're trying to make a difference, but they don't have all the skills and capacity to do it. So sometimes I would contribute in different ways, either by giving advice, supporting them with documents, so in-kind financial contribution, whatever is needed at the time, and if I manage to do it. So and currently I'm just involved with a few NGOs still.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, we've spoken about where we think the youth and the next generation are going to take the industry and the space. What are your hopes for the future, for the direction in which the world is going in, but also particularly in your profession?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
It's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question with what is going on in the world currently.
Yeah.
Well, if we start off by Sudan, I was very hopeful until recently that things will just move to the better and change to the better. But the recent war has put me down a bit. So I pray that things will change. But I'm a big believer in youth in general. I sometimes envy them and wish that I was, with generations. I was a Generation Z myself. So I believe that they will make a huge difference. As mentioned earlier, they don't have the tolerance that my generation had when it came to seeing wrong being done. And they have the ability, they have the freedom to voice out their opinion more, and they have the freedom to be different and to demand change and to see change through. So I'm hopeful. I am nevertheless optimistic that things will move to the better, and in Sudan as well, and across the world, yes.
Well, Muna, if you are leading the next generation, I think we're in very good hands. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here with us today, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Great.
Women in Leadership, brought to you by HeronCode, the management consultancy for what happens next. For more information, you can visit HeronCode.com.